Well, this is the spring lecture of Dr. Sobek, since it's not annual. And he will continue to talk about his experiences with Dr. Reich and in orgonomy. This format today is a little more open in that he's going to talk specifically about the history of the last years working with Reich and what is referred to as the conspiracy period, which has been very, very carefully documented by Dr. Reich and the others working with Dr. Reich in a very little known 3-volume collection called the Conspiracy File, which Dr. Reich distributed to the members of the Orgonomic Institute at that time. Dr. Sobek was directly involved with that, and it's a rare opportunity to have somebody who was there and actually went through that period. It's often been my experience in talking with Dr. Sobek and others who went through it, that it's extremely difficult for many younger people to understand what kind and just how real the attack and the constant threat was, and how many lives were, really damaged and destroyed, and how much of the work was damaged and destroyed and misrepresented and misconstrued. Some people were around at that time, know it, but it's often lost in retrospect and often seen as some sort of vague, feeling of persecution, and it really isn't when you really begin to look at it. And so Dr. Sobek offers a rare opportunity in terms of responding to that period of history, and will give his personal reminiscences about it, but he's also brought, which is a rare opportunity, some of the conspiracy documents and letters that will give you a feeling for what was going on. He'll read from some of that. And I think the format that we discussed was that it's open to questions, and as long as you don't interrupt him in the middle of a particular thought or point, it's fine to ask questions as they come up and give him a chance to respond to them. So Dr. Sobek, who is hesitating about continuing with this ongoing lecture series, so try to convince him that he should continue.
Okay, he said it all. We can go.
We'll take a break about halfway through and just get coffee. So.
Yes, it has to do with primarily the medical condition called emotional plague, and how it created the conspiracy against orgonomy, or Dr. Reich, and primarily the energy. The one who followed the path of the development of orgone energy. It was a trying time, and I'm telling you, when I look back on it, I just can't believe it, how the killers can go after you, if you threaten them in any way. And just to introduce it, the emotional plague. The term emotional plague has no defamatory connotation. It does not refer to conscious malice, moral or biological degeneration. An organism which from birth is, no wonder why I couldn't read this. An organism which from birth is constantly impeded in its natural way of locomotion develops artificial forms of locomotion. Right. It limps or moves on crutches. Similarly, an individual moves through life by the means of the emotional plague. If from birth its natural self-regulation, life manifestations have been suppressed. The individual afflicted by the emotional plague limbs, characterologically speaking. The emotional plague is a chronic myopathy. That is the ergonomic term, but it's what we would call sickness or disease of the organism. It makes its first appearance with the first suppression of genital love life, on a mass scale. It became an epidemic which has tortured the people of the earth for thousands of years. There are no grounds for the assumption that it passes in a hereditary manner from mother to child. Rather, it is implanted in the child from the first day of life. It is an epidemic disease like schizophrenia or cancer, with this important difference. It manifests itself essentially in social living. Periodically, like any other plague, such as bubonic plague, cholera, or AIDS, the emotional plague takes on the dimension of a pandemic in a form of a gigantic breakthrough of sadism. Ruinous lying and gossip, which is one of the major form of killing, gossip. And criminality such as the Catholic Inquisition of the Middle Ages, the Holocaust of World War II, the slaughter in Cambodia, apartheid in South Africa, numerous ethnic killings, which is happening now in Bosnia and Rwanda. The Red Witch hunts during the 1920s, that's another example. The McCarthy hearings, and the numerous, again, as I say, ethnic killings that are happening now. If we did not consider the emotional plague a disease in the strict sense of the word, we would be in danger of mobilizing the policeman's club against it, instead of medicine and education. It is characteristic of the emotional plague that it necessitates the policeman's club and thus reproduces itself. Nevertheless, in spite of the threat to life which the emotional plague represents, it will never be mastered by means of the policeman's club. Once I discussed this with Dr. Wright, since it is a disease, what about capital punishment? We don't apply capital punishment with people with, say, smallpox or cholera or tuberculosis, which spread to other people, and they die as a result of it. And what about, and you know, the crimes that are committed, murders, really. And he said that was a question that he often had trouble with. Since he said it's a disease, we don't kill other people who have disease which kill other people. But he said there's only one instance where he felt that he would apply the death penalty if somebody came towards him with a gun or a knife. He would have to apply, to defend himself or his life, capital punishment. But the other way, if somebody, well, of course, everybody's debating that, and I'm not sure myself.
Okay, can I, since you said to interrupt?
Right.
I mean, what, in a sense, if it's a disease function, say, similar in some way to cancer in the individual organism,
But
and if you have a tumor or cancer that's operable, you would remove it
right.
surgically. So in a sense, could you conceive of capital punishment as a surgical removal from the social organism of diseased cells?
No, yeah, no. You're removing the whole organism. We don't remove the whole organism when somebody's spread cholera to other people with cholera or tuberculosis, you know. Well, as far as we know, cancer is not contagious, although there's questions now, since the virus is concerned in causation of cancer, whether it can be spread, I don't know.
But then he would have been in favor of isolation of...
Well, yes, certainly. We do isolate. we used to isolate smallpox, and we still do actually. And other contagious, scarlet fever. I remember kids got scarlet fever. It was very contagious and very deadly to the organism and to anybody else who got it. And you don't remove the whole organism. But go ahead.
The difference is if someone that has smallpox, you don't deter somebody else from getting smallpox or from having smallpox if you kill that person with smallpox. On the other hand, if someone is a murderer and you apply the death penalty, you may deter a certain amount of people from killing other people.
Yep. Look at that. I cannot. I mean, he had the same problem. It is a disease. Criminality is a disease. The emotional plague, person infected with the emotional plague will justify crime, does justify crime, right? Either you believe they were born with that, or they, as a result of the deprivation of their functioning from birth, and it becomes a disease. I was going to mention it. What's
The thing that I see is that when you have TB or you have those other things, they're treated. People that are sent to jail for rape and so on and so forth, they're said they're never treated.
So
I mean, they're
no. They do get treatment, and I can tell you a treatment is applied.
what's a treatment?
Wait a minute. I worked in a federal penitentiary as a psychiatrist for 3 years, and I didn't know about ergonomy at the time, and it was just all the psychiatrists and even the penologists at the time, and even today I read that they have no adequate means of changing that around. Doesn't mean someday we won't. But of course, now we're getting in the tertiary stage of treatment. Dr. Reich was more, said it could only be prevented by primary, and that is, I'll go on. Primary care primarily it can only be mastered by life being protected from infancy on. Is it that simple? No. It is difficult. Nobody can even imagine how difficult it is. Wilhelm Reich, however, was optimistic and said it may take only 500 years if we don't blow ourselves off the face of the earth. Now I want to describe how the emotional plague organized attacks and finally resulted in Dr. Reich's death. On September 4th, 1948, Wilhelm Reich held his first open meeting on the oncoming conspiracy and plague attack against him. He opened up the seminar on the oncoming plague attack at Organon. It had even started, it started because at the meeting, Dr. Hoppe, who was from Israel, an ergonomist there, was held at the customs, or what do you want to call it, asking why he was coming, why he was visiting Dr. Reich. Did he know that he was seducing children and experimenting with this and that, and that he was a communist? And Hoppe talked his way through. A.S. Neil of Summerhill, of course, he wasn't a communist at the time, but he was quite a sympathizer, and he had a lot of friends, and he was not allowed into the country at that time. At that meeting, where Dr. Reich stated that a